Hi everyone, it's Angela here, and today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on the basics of Microsoft Excel, and so feel free to follow along with me. So pop open a Excel blank template or blank sheet, and we'll get started. The first thing to know about Microsoft Excel is that it is known as a spreadsheet software. And I know that it's tempting to treat it like a piece of graph paper, since the equivalent of, let's say, typing on a typewriter on a piece of paper is Word. You would expect this, something that looks pretty much like graph paper, to have its equivalent as like graph paper. But essentially, it's important to remember that Excel is kind of like tiny little mini calculators in every single little box. So it's a spreadsheet software that really doesn't seem to have a very good equivalent in sort of like the physical realm. Alright, so some things to keep in mind with Excel. Number one, anything that you want to do for your spreadsheet can probably be done with some kind of function rather than a manual change. Meaning, don't manually add up your columns or type out a series of repeating numbers when a function or fill option may do what you need. Number two, Excel doesn't really like it when you put manual breaks in your data. Keep your rows and columns organized and try to not place random data in cells. It's much harder to manipulate if it's not kept consistent. Number three, functions are features found in most versions of Excel. It becomes a matter of how those functions are organized on the toolbar. So again, my version of Excel might look a little bit different than yours, but it should have most of the same features. When saving your spreadsheets, keep in mind whether or not you will need to open this on another computer. Excel is a specific program that will not be compatible with other spreadsheet programs. Save your spreadsheet regularly. Use Control S for the shortcut for saving, and also, or just use the little save icon up in the top there. And next, if you're not sure where to go, Google it, or use Microsoft's Excel Help Center. So any one of those options will give you, or use the where is the, oh, it's a tab. Use the Help tab. In previous versions, it used to be a little question mark up at the top here. Now it's got its own little tab. All right, let's rock and roll. So we will start out by explaining what Excel is. Again, it's a spreadsheet software. It's organized into columns, which are labeled with the alphabet, and then rows, which are numbered. Now, generally speaking, when you organize a spreadsheet, your columns kind of represent your types of data, sort of like the individual elements of data, and the rows represent your individual instances of data or points of data. Generally speaking, that's how you organize your data in an Excel sheet. Alright, the Home tab. The Home tab up here at the top in the ribbon allows you to do a lot of the basic things that you would find in other Microsoft products. This is where it controls a lot of the basics like copy, cut, paste over here in the clipboard. It controls your font, so the font face, the font size, coloring, background color, that kind of thing. It controls alignment, meaning the alignment of how the data in the cells is organized. It controls your formatting for a number. It controls styles, including conditional formatting, which I won't get into, but it's important. That also includes cells, meaning if you need to insert cells, delete cells, or format cells. It includes editing capabilities like auto, sum, fill, clear, sort and filter, find and select, ideas, and sensitivity. And again, yours may look slightly different than this, but for the most part, it's probably similar. Alright, insert. Insert is where you will find the ability to literally insert things into the spreadsheet. This is where you'll find pivot tables, illustrations, sort of the same as a Word document, being able to insert pictures and shapes. add-ins, charts, and charts is unique to Excel, tours, sparklines, filters, links, comments, text boxes, word art, things like that, and symbols. Page layout. Page layout pretty much controls themes, mostly for printing and things like that, I should note. Themes, margins, the orientation, the size, print area, breaks, background, print tiles. And again, page layout really has most to do with how it looks if printed. Formulas. This is a huge part of Excel. Formulas is the ability to calculate cells based on different formulas. And there are all sorts of different types. They go by sort of like theme. So for example, the financial formulas. So, calculating interest rates, for example. Or under logical, these are statements like if, then, and, those kinds of things. Text is if you're changing text based on a certain formula. Date and time allows you to formulate or format dates and times. Lookup and reference means that you can sort of, again, look for a particular field value. Math and trig is, as it sounds, math and trig. Cosines, decimals, aggregate, all sorts of stuff. And then there's more. Under data, data is where you will find the ability to manipulate your data. So this is where you'll find things like refreshing data, data types, sorting data, filtering data, moving text to columns, flash filling, removing duplicates, data validation. And again, I won't go into all of these, grouping and ungrouping and subtotaling data, but it's pretty much organizing your data. Review is sort of similar to Word in that it controls spelling, thesaurus, checking for accessibility, translating, adding comments, notes. This is also where you can protect your sheet. So if you don't want anyone else to edit it, you can actually protect it or allow only certain ranges to be edited. View controls just how it looks on the screen for you. So you can zoom in, zoom out, you can add new windows, arrange it, freeze panes, and again, this is just how it looks in on your screen. And then the Help tab. Alright, so those are the basic tabs and all of the different functionalities that are kind of seated within each of those tabs. So now let's just take a look a little further at what what all is available. Under File, you will also find the ability to go under Options, and you can actually control the way that some things are formulated. So for example, you can customize your ribbon, and again, the ribbon is this sort of what do I want to say? It's like the big set of options that displays and spreads across the top of your sheet. So you can actually change what is displayed in each of those ribbons if you want to. For things like proofing, you can tell it to ignore words in uppercase, data. Disable undo for large pivot table refresh operations. So there's just all sorts of different options that you can customize the way Excel functions for you. Down here at the bottom, you'll see that this says Sheet 1. It's important to realize that spreadsheets are organized into literal sheets. So this whole document, this file, is called a workbook. And then each workbook can have multiple worksheets. So this is one sheet, and if I use the plus here, I can add another separate sheet. So meaning that it's going to be a completely separate piece of data or sheet of data. I can rename my sheets, so I can double click on them to rename them, or I can right click and say rename. I can delete the sheet. Another cool thing you can do is move or copy the sheet. So if you need to make a copy of a sheet, or if you need to move the sheet into a different workbook, you can use the move or copy function to do so. So you can say move or copy, tell it what book you're moving it to. So for example, if you want to move it to a new book, or maybe a book that you have open, you can do that. And then if you need to create a copy of it, just make sure you're checking the box to say, I'm moving it, but I'm also creating a copy. Meaning that your sheet that's here will stay here, and a copy is what will move into your new book. You can also change the display, meaning which sheet displays first. So by left clicking and holding on a tab, I can move the sheet and reorder the sheets in whatever way I prefer. And then it's important to realize for Excel, depending on what functionality you're doing, your crosshair, so meaning my mouse here, your crosshair will look different depending on where you place the mouse and what functions you're trying to do. Alright, so you'll notice that if I come up here, or I'll start in the, I guess, in the main sheet area, you'll notice that it's a white crosshair. This is sort of a general selection tool, meaning that you're going to select a specific cell using the white crosshair. And you'll notice that right now I have selected cell D4. So by selecting just cell D4, it means that this is the cell that I'm operating in. And you'll notice that the column and the row that I am in are both kind of highlighted so that you can see what exact column and row I'm operating in. Now, that changes. So depending on what you're doing, if I move down here into the bottom right corner of the cell that I've selected, you'll notice that the crosshair changes. Now, when it's a black crosshair, a thin black crosshair like this, usually it's indicating that you're going to do some kind of fill function. And a fill function can be performed by, again, selecting the cell, going into the bottom right corner to get this sort of thin black crosshair, and then holding down the left button, the left mouse button, and then filling. So again, that'll perform a fill function, and I'll feature that later to sort of show you what it does. If you come to the sides of any cell that's selected, you'll notice that it changes into sort of a black crosshair with arrows at the end. This is indicating that you're going to move the cell. So if I hold and left click, I'm actually going to pick up and move the cell. Now, there's nothing in the cell, so it's something you won't be able to see. So let me just demonstrate how this works. When you type in a cell, I remember I said that each cell is pretty much treated like its own little calculator. Now I can type words, and that's just, again, I've selected the cell, and then I just started typing. Now, again, if I pick up and move, it will pick up and move the contents of the cell. Alright, so again, that was the crosshair with the arrows on it. Now, the fill function is pretty sweet, so I will show you how that works. Now, I have started a pattern. 1, 2. I'm going to select both of these to indicate the pattern. And then I'm going to come down here to my fill crosshair. Again, it's the thin black crosshair. And I'm going to fill it down, drag it down. So again, I've left clicked, and I'm just going to drag with the black crosshair. And it actually completes the fill for me. It follows the pattern. And it does that not just for numbers. And so it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can follow a pattern as long as you give it to them. I treat Excel like it's a thing. I like Excel, but I need to remember it's not a person. So 5, 10, 15, it will follow the pattern for me. Same thing with dates. Again, black crosshair in the bottom right. Left click, hold it, and scroll. It's a beautiful thing. So again, the fill function will normally assume that it's following a pattern of forward progression of some kind, unless you tell it otherwise. Now, like I said, each cell also performs like a calculator, and it does that. You indicate that it's performing some kind of calculation by using the equal sign to start. Now, you'll notice that kind of things changed a little bit. It's going to assume that you're doing some kind of formula. You can either grab a formula from your selection of what's available here, or you can perform, simple calculations and tasks like 6 plus 13, and it performs the function for you. And you'll notice a couple of things about the display. It displays the answer in the cell, but when you click on the cell, up here in the formula bar, it will display the actual formula that's being conducted. Cells can also reference other cells as part of formulas. Now, for example, I have 6 plus 13 here, and my displayed answer is 19. Now, in another cell, I can refer to my other cell as part of my formula. So, for example, I've opened my formula with an equals sign. I'm going to select this cell, and you'll notice that in my formula here, it's kind of put in F3, meaning it's referring to this cell. So it's going to be F3. Well, if I just do that, equals F3, it's going to copy the solution or the value that's calculated in this cell in my new cell. Now, if I come back up here to my formula bar, I can edit it and make further changes. So let's say it's actually F3 times 248, 9. There we go. So those are just some examples of what the cells can do. And again, these are very basic functions. There's a whole lot more it can do, again, with formulas. I won't get too deep into the weeds, but it can do things like combine two words together, split two words apart, take the first two letters that are listed, all sorts of different stuff. So for example, if I have the word kitten in this cell, I can say equals and then the formula left, and then you'll notice that as I type the formula left, it's asking now for, it returns the specific number of characters from the start of a text string. Again, the left number of text strings. So I'm going to say left. Now it's asking what text? This text. So I'm selecting this number. Now I'm going to comma, and now it's looking for the number of characters, and I'm going to say it's going to be the first 3 characters. Close my parentheses, and there's my answer. And these formulas can also be filled. So for example, if I have kitten, and then I have rabbit, and then I have fox, and then I have cougar, I can take this formula and fill it. Now, remember that formulas will fill with the understanding that it has to increase the cell being referenced in each one as it goes down. So for example, this one was referring to its left for cell F8. Now it knows that when I go down one, that now it's going to be taking from F9 and then F10 and F11. So it knows that it needs to increase but still keep the number of characters the same. So it won't increase the characters. It understands that you only want 3 characters, but it will increase the cell being referenced unless you tell it otherwise. And that can also be done with a bunch of different sort of formulas and sort of shortcuts, I'll say. So for example, if I don't want to increase the cell being referenced, I can use a $sign in front of the cell, in front of the column and the cell number or row number being referenced. And using that $sign means that when I go to fill, it constantly, it's sort of stuck. It knows that it has to stay referring to F8 as it goes down. Again, selecting large banks of data is just holding the left mouse and then selecting. You can insert cells. So if I have something here, let's say I need to put something in between kitten and cougar, you can select over here with the black arrow facing out here. So again, if I'm mousing over the entire row, you'll notice that there's a black arrow, and that black arrow means that when you left click it once, it selects the entire row. And now I can do things with the entire row. So if I right click, I can do things like insert and insert a row. Same thing for columns. If I'm up here in the column row, you'll notice that I have a black arrow, and I can select the arrow to select the entire, or select the column, and then right click to insert columns. If you mouse to the edge of a row or column, you'll see that you have sort of like a double arrow pointing left and right, or in this case up and down. This allows you to expand the size of the cell or decrease the size of the cell. And again, that's same thing for rows. Increase and decrease the size of the row. If you double click with that option, so if you double click while it's here, it will snap to fit to the longest piece of text or formula or value in a column or row. So if I double click, it will snap to fit my data. It's handy. Now, in terms of display when printing, I do get a lot of questions about, I see lines here, I see grid lines, but when I print the paper, so if I go to a File, Print option, it's not going to print the grid lines. And that's important to understand. So we see the grid lines, but they're not going to show up unless you sort of make them so. So if I want to print this and I want my grid lines to show, I can right click, and again there's a few ways to do this. This is how I generally do. I right click, go to Format Cells, and under Format Cells you have all of those options related to your cells, including a category of data. So if you have a number and you want to make sure that there's a certain number of decimal places, alignment if you want the text to wrap, if you want it to align to the left, and vertically you want it on the bottom. Font controls, again, the font face, the font size. Border is where it will display a colored border, whereas right now there is none. So under border, you can make a visible line on the borders of each of the cells, and you can specify which borders of the cells. So for example, if I want a thick dark line on the outside, meaning on the border of my square, I can select just the outline, and you'll notice that it kind of displays just the outline. I can say OK, and now I see a thick black border around this. Now if I want all of my cells within it to have a different border or the same border, I can go back in, and then I can select, let's say I want the dotted line on my inside lines, and then say OK. And now when I go to print, it's actually going to visually show me the grid lines that are associated with the areas that I formatted. So again, those are things that I see people wanting to do all the time in terms of the display and view of their data. Now, next thing I'm going to go into that most people use Excel for is to create charts of data. And so I'll just very quickly go over a tutorial of how to do charts, and then I think I'm going to end this tutorial. I'm going to try to keep these kind of bite-size. So to create a chart, you're going to organize your data in such a way that it's going to be neat and nice. So for example, let's say my data is going to be number of kittens in a litter. So this is litter 1, litter 2, litter 3, I love kittens, litter 4. Alright, and then this is mom, this is Siamese, this is Persian, this is Russian blue, gotta do an orange tiger because that's what my cat is. Yes, kitty kitty. Alright, so now the Siamese, their first litter had 5, and the next one had 7, and then 3, and then 5 again. And then Persian, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, And again, I'm just filling data at the moment just to show you what this looks like. Alright, there we go. I have some data. Now if I select all of my data, I can then do things with it. So now I'm going to go to my Insert tab, and I'm going to go under my Charts section. I can either go under Recommended Charts, or I can be more specific if I already know what I want my data to look like. If I click on Recommended Charts, it's going to show me what I expected, which is a clustered bar chart. But there are other options. So for example, I can just come down here and see what each of them looks like. So again, I see that my cat types are displayed along my x-axis, and then my number of cats in the litter are displayed here, and then the indicator for each litter is a bar. Now if I wanted that to display like a line graph, I can do that. If I want them to be stacked columns, I can do that as well. So if I want to see total number of kittens over time, I can do that. Now I'll also show you that you can change the axes. So for example, if I want to do this one, but let's say my axes, let's say I don't want the litters, I want the cats to be the data. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what I mean here. So now after I've created my chart, I'm going to make it a little bigger. And again, I'm just using my crosshairs to come down here and drag it to make it bigger. There are elements that are here that I can edit, like the chart title, for example. And now I can actually change my data. So for example, I can switch the row and column just by clicking a button. Now, by switching row and column, I have changed from having my litters as each of the sections to having each of my cat types as the sections. And again, that was just by going up and doing switch row and column. I can change the data elements that are available or the design by going up here to chart styles. Again, just changes the style, the look. I can add chart elements. So for example, if I want to see major grid lines, or if I want to see, let's see, primary, minor, horizontal. And they're very faint actually, that's hard to see. I can add things like axis titles. So for example, if I wanted a vertical title, I can add an axis title here, and then I can add kittens in litter. And this is litter size by breed. So again, lots of different ways to customize charts, and this is just a really quick overview of it, but you'll notice that the chart design, it kind of, when you create a chart or when you insert other elements, it kind of gives you these extra tabs on the fly for changing stuff like this. And again, this can be moved around, things like that. Okay, so in this lesson, I introduced Excel as a spreadsheet software. I showed you the basics of the different mouse controls depending on what field you're in. We talked about the ribbon. We talked about tabs. We talked about doing formulas, basic formulas, and cell referencing. And then we talked about charts. And that's where I'll end it for now. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below. But otherwise, hopefully this was helpful, a really quick crash course into using Microsoft Excel. And thanks a lot. Talk to everybody later.